The shrill ring of the school bell pierced the air, signaling the end of another chaotic day at Westbrook High. As students rushed out of classrooms, their excited chatter filling the hallways, one figure remained motionless amidst the commotion. Sarah Thompson, the school's dedicated music teacher, stood at her desk, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Her eyes were fixed on a crumpled sheet of paper, Ethan Miller's latest test, adorned with a glaring red F. "Damn it, Ethan," she muttered under her breath, running a hand through her disheveled auburn hair. This was the third failed test this month, and Sarah was at her wit's end. Ethan Miller, age 16, had been the bane of her existence since the beginning of the school year. Disruptive, apathetic, and seemingly determined to push every one of her buttons, he was the very definition of a problem student. As Sarah gathered her belongings, her mind raced with questions. What was she missing? How could she reach this troubled teen? She'd tried everything: after-school sessions, positive reinforcement, even arranging meetings with his parents. But nothing seemed to work. Robert and Linda Miller, Ethan's parents, were polite but distant, offering little insight into their son's behavior. Lost in thought, Sarah nearly collided with Principal Dawson in the hallway. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Dawson," she apologized, quickly regaining her composure. The older man smiled kindly. "No harm done, Sarah. You seem a bit distracted. Everything all right?" Sarah hesitated, then sighed. "It's Ethan Miller. I can't seem to get through to him. I'm worried he might fail the class at this rate." Principal Dawson's expression turned sympathetic. "Ah, yes. Young Mr. Miller has been a challenge for many of our staff. Keep trying, Sarah. Sometimes these difficult students just need someone to believe in them." As Sarah nodded and bid the principal goodbye, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Ethan's story than met the eye. Something in the principal's words struck a chord. Believe in them. Maybe that was the key she'd been missing. The next day, Sarah arrived at school with renewed determination. She'd spent half the night revising her lesson plans, searching for a way to engage Ethan. As her first class filed in, she scanned the room, her heart sinking when she noticed Ethan's empty seat. Typical, she thought, trying to quell her disappointment. But just as she was about to begin the lesson, the door burst open. Ethan stumbled in, his dark hair a mess, his clothes rumpled as if he'd slept in them. "Nice of you to join us, Mr. Miller," Sarah said, unable to keep the sarcasm from her voice. "Please, take your seat." Ethan mumbled something unintelligible and slumped into his chair, his eyes downcast. Sarah took a deep breath, reminding herself of her new resolve. She wouldn't let him slip away that easily. As the class progressed, Sarah introduced a new piece of music, a complex, emotionally charged concerto. She watched her students' reactions carefully, noting the mix of excitement and trepidation on their faces. All except Ethan, who seemed lost in his own world, absently doodling in his notebook. "All right, class," Sarah announced. "I'd like each of you to take a few minutes to study the sheet music. Then, we'll go around the room and have each of you play a small section. Don't worry if you can't get it perfect. This is just to get a feel for the piece." One by one, the students took their turns at the piano. Some stumbled through their sections, while others showed promise. But as they neared Ethan's turn, Sarah felt a knot forming in her stomach. She braced herself for another confrontation, another refusal to participate. "Ethan," she called, keeping her voice as neutral as possible. "You're up." For a moment, Ethan didn't move. Then, slowly, he raised his head. Something in his eyes caught Sarah off guard. A flicker of, was that fear? Uncertainty? Before she could analyze it further, Ethan stood up and made his way to the piano. The room fell silent as Ethan sat down, his fingers hovering over the keys. Sarah held her breath, expecting him to refuse or to purposely butcher the piece. But what happened next would change everything. Ethan's fingers touched the keys, and the world seemed to stop. The opening notes of the concerto filled the room, but not as written on the sheet music. No, this was something entirely different. Something extraordinary. Ethan played with a passion and skill that Sarah had never witnessed in all her years of teaching. His fingers danced across the keys, coaxing out melodies that seemed to defy the laws of music theory. It was as if the piano had come alive under his touch, pouring out emotions too complex for words. The other students sat in stunned silence, their mouths agape. Sarah felt her heart racing, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was witnessing. This wasn't just talent, this was genius. This was the kind of playing that came along once in a generation, if that. As the last notes faded away, Ethan's hands fell to his sides. He sat there, motionless, as if awakening from a trance. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah found her voice first. "Ethan," she whispered, her words barely audible. "That was incredible. Where did you learn to play like that?" Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with what looked like panic. "I don't know," he stammered. "I just played." Before Sarah could press further, the bell rang, startling everyone out of their stupor. Ethan bolted from his seat and was out the door before anyone could react, leaving behind a room full of bewildered students and one very shaken music teacher. As the other students filed out, still buzzing with excitement over what they'd witnessed, Sarah sank into her chair. Her mind was reeling. How had she missed this? How had everyone missed this? Ethan Miller, the troublemaker, the failing student, was a musical prodigy of the highest order. But something nagged at the back of Sarah's mind. The fear in Ethan's eyes, his panic after playing, it didn't make sense. Why would someone with such incredible talent hide it? And why did he seem so frightened by his own abilities? Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the classroom door. She looked up to see Robert Miller, Ethan's father, standing in the doorway. His face was pale, his expression grim. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to talk about Ethan. It's not safe for him to play like that. You don't understand what you've done." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. As she met Mr. Wan, Miller's intense gaze, she realized that uncovering Ethan's talent was just the beginning. She was standing on the edge of something much bigger, much darker than she could have ever imagined. And in that moment, Sarah Thompson knew that her life and Ethan's would never be the same again. Sarah's mind raced as she ushered Mr. Miller into the empty classroom, closing the door behind them. "Mr. Miller," she began, trying to keep her voice steady, "what do you mean it's not safe? Ethan's gift is extraordinary. He should be nurtured, encouraged." "You don't understand," Robert Miller hissed, his eyes darting nervously to the windows. "Ethan's talent, it's not just music, it's so much more, and there are people who would." He trailed off, running a shaking hand through his hair. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Mr. Miller, please, if Ethan's in some kind of trouble, I want to help. What's really going on here?" Before Robert could respond, the classroom door burst open. Linda Miller rushed in, her face a mask of panic. "Robert, we have to go. Now. They know." Sarah watched in bewilderment as the Millers exchanged a loaded glance. Robert nodded grimly, then turned back to Sarah. "Miss Thompson, forget what you saw today. For your own safety and for Ethan's, please, just let this go." With that cryptic warning, the Millers hurried out, leaving Sarah alone with her whirling thoughts and a growing sense of dread. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself unable to focus on anything but the mystery surrounding Ethan Miller. The boy hadn't returned to school since his stunning performance, and his parents weren't answering any of her calls. Something was terribly wrong, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow responsible. On the fourth day of Ethan's absence, Sarah made a decision. After her last class, she got into her car and drove to the Miller's address on file. As she pulled up to the modest suburban home, she noticed something odd. The curtains were drawn, and there was an eerie stillness about the place. Gathering her courage, Sarah approached the front door and knocked. No answer. She tried again, louder this time. "Hello? Mr. and Mrs. Miller? It's Miss Thompson from Westbrook High. I'm here about Ethan." Silence. Just as Sarah was about to give up, she heard a faint sound from inside, a muffled thud, followed by what sounded like music, but not like any music she'd ever heard before. It was haunting, ethereal, almost beyond human capability. Without thinking, Sarah tried the doorknob. To her surprise, it turned easily. The door swung open with a creak, revealing a dark interior. "Hello?" she called out, her voice wavering. "Is anyone home?" As she stepped inside, the music grew louder, pulling her forward like a siren's call. Sarah found herself moving through the house as if in a trance, following the otherworldly melody. It led her to a closed door at the end of a hallway. The music was coming from behind it, growing more intense with each passing second. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. Every instinct told her to turn back, to run, but she couldn't resist the pull of that haunting tune. She took a deep breath and opened the door. The sight that greeted her would be seared into her memory forever. Ethan sat at a grand piano in the center of what looked like a high-tech recording studio. But this was no ordinary setup. The walls were covered in complex equations and musical notations that seemed to shimmer and move. Surrounding Ethan were holographic displays showing waveforms and patterns that pulsed in time with his music. But it was Ethan himself that truly took Sarah's breath away. His eyes were closed, his fingers a blur on the keys, and he seemed to be glowing. A faint blue-tinged aura surrounded him, growing brighter with each crescendo. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Suddenly, the music stopped. Ethan's eyes snapped open, fixing on Sarah with an intensity that made her take a step back. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice eerily calm, "you shouldn't be here." Before Sarah could respond, a hand grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. She found herself face to face with Linda Miller, whose expression was a mix of fear and fury. "What have you done?" Linda hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've just walked into?" Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her world was tilting on its axis, everything she thought she knew crumbling around her. I don't understand," she finally managed to stammer. "What is all this? What's happening to Ethan?" Robert appeared behind his wife, his face grim. "Miss Thompson, you've just stumbled into a secret that goes far beyond anything you could imagine. Ethan isn't just a musical prodigy. His abilities, they're not entirely human." Sarah's mind reeled. "Not human? What are you talking about?" Ethan spoke up, his voice carrying an authority far beyond his years. "It's okay. She needs to know. We might need her help now." Linda and Robert exchanged a look, then nodded reluctantly. Robert gestured for Sarah to sit down. "Miss Thompson, what we're about to tell you will sound impossible, but I assure you, it's all true. Ethan, he's not our biological son. We're not even his real parents." Sarah sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "What?" Linda took a deep breath. 16 years ago, we were assigned to protect Ethan. We're not the Millers. We're undercover agents with a classified government organization. Ethan's real parents were, well, they weren't from around here." "You mean they were foreigners?" Sarah asked, grasping for any semblance of normalcy. Robert shook his head. "No, Miss Thompson, they weren't from this planet." The room fell silent as Sarah processed this bombshell. Her mind raced through every science fiction movie she'd ever seen, every conspiracy theory she'd ever heard. But none of it prepared her for the reality sitting before her, a teenage boy with powers beyond human comprehension. "Ethan's parents were part of a peaceful expedition to Earth," Robert continued. "They were musicians of unparalleled skill, able to manipulate energy and matter through sound. But their presence was detected by less friendly elements. There was an attack. Ethan's parents sacrificed themselves to protect him, encoding their knowledge and abilities into his DNA." Linda picked up the thread. "We were tasked with keeping Ethan safe, hidden from those who would exploit his abilities. His music isn't just beautiful, Miss Thompson. It has the power to alter reality itself." Sarah's head was spinning. "But why hide it? Why not nurture his talents?" Ethan spoke up, his voice tinged with sadness. "Because every time I play, I risk exposing myself. The wrong people could use my abilities to cause unimaginable destruction. That's why I had to pretend to be a troublemaker, to push everyone away, including you, Miss Thompson. I'm sorry." Sarah's heart pounded as she gripped the steering wheel, her eyes darting between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. The black SUVs pursuing her were relentless, their sirens wailing through the night. She pressed harder on the accelerator, praying that her diversion was giving Ethan and the Millers enough time to escape. Come on," she muttered through gritted teeth, swerving onto a narrow side street. The device Robert had given her blinked steadily on the passenger seat, its soft hum a constant reminder of the extraordinary circumstances she now found herself in. Suddenly, a deafening screech filled the air. Sarah's car lurched violently as one of her tires blew out. "No, not now," she cried, struggling to maintain control of the vehicle. With a sickening crunch, the car slammed into a guardrail, coming to a jarring stop. Dazed but determined, Sarah grabbed the device and stumbled out of the car. She could hear car doors slamming behind her as her pursuers closed in. With no other option, she ran, her lungs burning as she pushed herself to her limits. But it was futile. Within moments, she felt strong hands grabbing her, forcing her to the ground. "Don't move," a gruff voice commanded. Sarah felt cold metal encircle her wrists as she was handcuffed. "You don't understand," she gasped, trying to reason with her captors. "You're making a terrible mistake." A tall, imposing man in a dark suit approached, his eyes hidden behind reflective sunglasses despite the late hour. "No, Miss Thompson," he said coolly. "I'm afraid it's you who doesn't understand the gravity of your situation." As Sarah was roughly pulled to her feet, she saw the man pick up the device she had dropped. He examined it closely, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Interesting toy. Now, why don't you tell us where the boy is?" Sarah's mind raced. She had to protect Ethan at all costs. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, hoping her voice wouldn't betray her fear. The man's smirk widened. "Come now, Miss Thompson. We both know that's not true, but don't worry, we have ways of making you talk." As Sarah was led to one of the waiting SUVs, a bone-chilling thought occurred to her. What if this had all been part of the plan? What if she was meant to be captured? Hours later, Sarah found herself in a stark, windowless room, her wrists shackled to a metal table. She had lost track of time, her interrogators coming and going in an endless cycle of questions and thinly veiled threats. Just when she thought she couldn't take anymore, the door opened once more. But instead of another stern-faced agent, in walked a familiar figure, Principal Dawson. "Mr. Dawson?" Sarah exclaimed, her confusion evident. "What are you doing here?" Dawson's kindly demeanor was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "Oh, Miss Thompson," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm afraid you've stumbled into something far bigger than you could have imagined." As Dawson took a seat across from her, the pieces started to fall into place. "You're part of this," Sarah whispered, the betrayal cutting deep. "You've been watching Ethan all along." Dawson nodded, a humorless smile on his face. "Very good. Yes, I've been monitoring Ethan Miller since he first arrived at Westbrook High. We knew of his unique heritage. We just needed the right moment to act." Sarah's mind reeled. "But why? What do you want with him?" "Power, Miss Thompson," Dawson replied, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "Imagine what we could do with Ethan's abilities. The boy can alter reality with his music. In the right hands, our hands, he could reshape the world." Sarah felt sick. "You're insane. Ethan's just a child." Dawson leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "A child with the power of a god. Now tell me where he is, or things will become very unpleasant for you." Before Sarah could respond, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Dawson's head snapped up, his composure cracking for the first time. "What the?" The door burst open, and a frantic agent rushed in. "Sir, we've got a situation. The perimeter's been breached. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." As if on cue, the most beautiful, haunting melody Sarah had ever heard began to filter through the air. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, growing in intensity with each passing second. Dawson's eyes widened in realization. "No," he breathed. "It can't be." The walls of the room began to shimmer and warp, reality itself seeming to bend under the power of the music. Sarah felt her shackles dissolve into mist, freeing her hands. And then, stepping through what appeared to be a tear in the fabric of space-time, came Ethan. But he was transformed. Gone was the sullen teenager. In his place stood a being of pure light and sound, his eyes glowing with otherworldly power. "Ethan!" Sarah cried out, a mix of relief and awe washing over her. Ethan's gaze fell upon Dawson, who had stumbled back against the wall in fear. "You sought to control that which you do not understand." Ethan's voice resonated, carrying with it the weight of galaxies. "You would twist my gift into a weapon. I cannot allow that." With a gesture, Ethan sent Dawson and the other agent flying across the room, pinning them against the wall with invisible force. He then turned to Sarah, his expression softening. "Miss Thompson, I'm sorry you were drawn into this, but your belief in me, your willingness to protect me even at great cost to yourself, it gave me the strength to embrace who I truly am." Sarah stood on shaky legs, overwhelmed by the power radiating from her former student. "Ethan, I don't understand. How did you find me? How are you doing all this?" A smile played at Ethan's lips. "The music, Miss Thompson. It connects all things. Once I stopped fighting my true nature, I could hear the song of the universe itself. Finding you was simply a matter of listening for the right melody. Suddenly, the room shook violently. Cracks began to appear in the walls and ceiling as Ethan's power continued to grow. "We need to leave," he said urgently. "This facility cannot contain the energies I've unleashed." Without waiting for a response, Ethan waved his hand, and Sarah felt herself being enveloped in a cocoon of warmth and light. The world around them blurred and shifted, reality bending to Ethan's will. When the light faded, Sarah found herself standing in a vast, otherworldly chamber. The walls pulsed with living music, and all around them, impossible instruments played themselves in perfect harmony. Robert and Linda, or whatever their real names were, stood nearby, looks of pride and apprehension on their faces. "Welcome," Ethan said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "to my true inheritance. This is but one of many sanctuaries left behind by my people. Here, I can learn to control my abilities, to use them for the betterment of both our worlds." Sarah's head spun as she tried to process everything that had happened. But what about Dawson and his organization? Won't they keep looking for you? Ethan's expression turned grim. "They will try, but I've seen the tapestry of possible futures, Miss Thompson. There are dark times ahead, forces that seek to unravel the very fabric of reality. I must prepare, grow stronger, and I'll need allies." He extended his hand to Sarah, his eyes shining with hope and determination. "Will you stand with me, Miss Thompson? Will you help me protect both our worlds from what's coming?" Sarah looked at the hand offered to her, knowing that if she took it, her life would never be the same. She thought of her simple life as a music teacher, of the normal world she had left behind. But then she remembered the look in Ethan's eyes when he first played for her class, the raw emotion and power in his music. With a deep breath, Sarah reached out and clasped Ethan's hand. "I'm with you," she said firmly. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As their hands met, a surge of energy pulsed through the chamber. The music swelled to a triumphant crescendo, and Sarah felt as though she could hear the very heartbeat of the universe. In that moment, she knew that this was just the beginning. The true symphony was yet to be written, and she would play her part in the grand composition that was to come. As the ethereal music faded to a gentle hum, Sarah found herself standing in awe of the incredible journey that had led her to this moment. The chamber around them pulsed with a soft, comforting light, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. Ethan, still radiating an otherworldly glow, turned to address Sarah and his guardians. "We've taken the first step," he said, his voice carrying a wisdom far beyond his years. "But our challenges are far from over." Robert, or whatever his real name was, stepped forward, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "Ethan's right. Dawson and his organization were just the tip of the iceberg. There are others out there who would seek to exploit Ethan's powers for their own gain." Linda nodded gravely. "We've managed to stay hidden for years, but now that Ethan's true nature has been revealed, we'll need to be more vigilant than ever." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process the magnitude of their situation. "But what can we do?" she asked, looking from Ethan to his guardians. "How can we possibly stand against forces that would reshape the world?" Ethan's eyes met Sarah's, and she felt a wave of calm wash over her. "Together," he said simply. "My powers are growing, but I still have much to learn. I'll need all of you to help me navigate this new reality." As if on cue, the chamber around them shimmered, and holographic displays materialized in the air. Sarah gasped as she saw images of distant planets, strange alien civilizations, and cosmic events beyond her comprehension. "This chamber," Ethan explained, "contains the collected knowledge of my people. Their history, their science, their art, it's all here. And it's not just information. This place can help me hone my abilities, teach me to use my powers responsibly." Robert stepped closer to one of the displays, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's incredible. With this knowledge, we could advance human understanding by centuries." "But we must be careful," Linda cautioned. "Introducing too much too quickly could destabilize your world. We need to find a balance." Sarah found herself nodding in agreement. As a teacher, she understood the importance of pacing, of building a strong foundation before moving on to more complex concepts. "We'll need a plan," she said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice, a way to gradually introduce some of this knowledge while keeping Ethan safe. Ethan smiled at her, and for a moment, Sarah saw a glimpse of the teenager he still was beneath the mantle of cosmic power. That's why I need you, Miss Thompson. Your experience as an educator, your ability to connect with people, these will be crucial in the days to come. As the gravity of their situation settled over the group, a comfortable silence fell. Each of them lost in thought, contemplating the challenges and wonders that lay ahead. Finally, Robert broke the silence. So what's our next move? Ethan waved his hand, and the holographic displays shifted, showing a map of Earth with pulsing points of light scattered across it. These are other sanctuaries, like this one, hidden around your world. We need to secure them, learn their secrets, and prepare for what's coming. And what exactly is coming? Sarah asked, a hint of trepidation in her voice. Ethan's expression turned somber. I'm not entirely sure, but I've seen glimpses of possible futures, some beautiful, some terrifying. There are forces out there, both on Earth and beyond, that would upset the balance of the universe. We must be ready to face them. As Sarah looked around at her unlikely new family, a boy with the power of a god, 2 secret agents turned guardians, and herself, a music teacher thrust into a cosmic drama, she felt a surge of determination. Well, she said, squaring her shoulders, I suppose we'd better get started then. Ethan nodded, a glimmer of hope shining in his eyes. Indeed. But first, there's something I need to show you all. Something that might help us in the battles to come. With a gesture, Ethan summoned a swirling vortex of musical notes and light. As the group watched in amazement, the vortex coalesced into a shimmering instrument, part guitar, part synthesizer, and part something entirely alien. This, Ethan said, his voice filled with reverence, is the harmonizer. It's an artifact of my people, capable of tapping into the very fabric of reality. With it, we can amplify my abilities, create defenses against those who would harm us, and perhaps even communicate with other worlds. As Ethan's fingers brushed the strings of the harmonizer, a chord rang out that seemed to resonate with the very atoms of their beings. Sarah felt a tingling sensation throughout her body, as if every cell was singing in harmony. Incredible, she breathed, understanding now more than ever the true power of music. This is just the beginning, Ethan said, his eyes alight with possibility. Together, we'll compose a new symphony for the universe, one of hope, of unity, of peace. As the group gathered around Ethan and the harmonizer, each placing a hand on the miraculous instrument, Sarah felt a sense of purpose, unlike anything she'd ever known. She may have started this journey as a simple music teacher, but now she was part of something far greater, a cosmic orchestra, playing out the fate of worlds. The chamber hummed with energy, the air thick with potential. And as Ethan began to play a melody that seemed to weave the very threads of reality, Sarah knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. In that moment, suspended between worlds and possibilities, Sarah Thompson made a silent vow. No matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what dark forces they might face, she would stand by Ethan's side. Together, they would face the music of the cosmos and ensure that the song of hope would never fade. As the last notes of Ethan's otherworldly melody faded away, Sarah found herself filled with an overwhelming sense of anticipation. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, filled with wonders beyond imagination, and test them in ways they couldn't yet fathom. But with the power of music, the strength of their newfound family, and the limitless potential of Ethan's gifts, she knew they stood a chance of making a real difference. Not just for Earth, but for all of creation. And so, dear viewer, our tale comes to a close, for now. But the Cosmic Symphony has only just begun its first movement. What wonders and perils await Ethan, Sarah, and their allies? What dark forces lurk in the shadows of the universe, waiting to strike? And how will the power of music shape the destiny of worlds? The answers to these questions and more await in the next chapter of this extraordinary journey. But before we part, I have a request for you. If this tale of music, mystery, and cosmic adventure has stirred something within you, if it has made you look at the world around you with new eyes and listen for the hidden melodies of the universe, then please, share this story with others. By spreading this tale, you become part of the cosmic orchestra yourself, helping to amplify the message of hope and wonder that Ethan and his allies fight to protect. And who knows? Perhaps by sharing, you'll inspire others to listen more closely to the music of their own lives, to seek out the extraordinary in the everyday. So go forth, dear viewer, with your senses attuned to the grand symphony of existence. And remember, whenever you hear a haunting melody on the wind or feel a rhythm pulsing through your very being, know that somewhere out there, Ethan, Sarah, and their cosmic ensemble are playing on, safeguarding the harmony of the universe one note at a time. Until we meet again in the next movement of this cosmic opus, may your own life be filled with music, wonder, and the endless possibilities that come when you dare to listen to the song of the stars.